In 2017, Eric Woods, a 21-year-old student from Salt Lake City, disappeared in the Utah desert. His motorcycle was found near the start of a trail, but the young man himself was nowhere to be found. 6 years passed. In a remote canyon, searchers stumbled upon a human skeleton. Nearby lay a metal container with a diary, whose pages contained shocking entries that immediately became part of a criminal investigation. August 12, 2017, Saturday. At 8:30 a.m., 21-year-old University of Utah student Eric Woods left his dormitory in Salt Lake City. He was studying geology with a focus on cartography and field observation. Teachers described him as attentive and methodical, while students described him as reserved but passionate about research. It came as no surprise to many that he decided to spend the weekend in a remote desert, as such trips were common practice for him. The vehicle Eric used was a black 2014 Enduro motorcycle. It was equipped with a luggage rack, where the young man had secured his backpack in advance. According to his relatives, it contained standard items: a sleeping bag, a first aid kit, several bottles of water, a notebook for notes and maps, a compass, a pocket knife, and food supplies for 1 or 2 days. Woods did not plan a multi-day expedition. His route was more like a short trip to explore the area. At 9:17 a.m., his mother received a message from him on Messenger. "Everything's fine. I'm on my way. I'll be back tomorrow after lunch." This was the last confirmed contact from Eric. The rest of his route has only been partially reconstructed. A surveillance camera at a gas station in Emery County recorded him at 11:46 a.m. He bought 2 bottles of water and a can of gasoline. He paid with a bank card. The video shows Eric in motorcycle gear, holding a helmet in his hands. His behavior was normal, and no strangers were seen nearby. At around 1 p.m., other visitors to Goblin Valley State Park noticed a motorcycle parked in the official parking lot at the trailhead. The bike was standing upright, the kickstand was down, and there was no key in the ignition. This was not unusual for tourists. Dozens of people leave their vehicles there every day to continue on foot. The next day, Sunday, the motorcycle was still there. In the morning, a group of park visitors returning from the parking lot noticed that the vehicle was still there. This meant that the owner had not returned. On Monday, August 14th, Eric's mother filed an official report with the Emery County Sheriff's Office. The document stated that her son had not returned home, was not answering his phone, and had not shown up for classes at the university. His mother reported that this was unusual, as Eric always kept in touch, even during short trips. On August 15th at 8:00 a.m., officers went to the parking lot near the trail. They confirmed that the motorcycle belonged to Woods. The vehicle had been there for 3 days. The license plates matched the registration information. The motorcycle was in good working order, the tank was almost full, and there were no signs of damage. There was no key in the ignition. After examining the surrounding area, officers found only a few faint footprints leading from the parking lot toward the trail, but after a few meters, they disappeared on the rocky terrain. There were no signs of a struggle, blood, or outside interference. There were also no items of equipment, food remains, or signs of overnight stay. An official missing person case was opened that same day. The sheriff's internal report states, 21-year-old student, left on a motorcycle for the desert. Vehicle found. Whereabouts unknown. Possible causes: disorientation, injury, criminal interference. Information about the missing person was entered into the federal database. Notifications were sent to neighboring counties. The university confirmed that the student was absent from classes. At this stage, the case had only a few confirmed facts: departure from Salt Lake City on the morning of August 12th, refueling in Emery County around noon, motorcycle in a parking lot near the trail, absence of the owner for at least 2 days. No other evidence or items that could indicate Eric's route after leaving the motorcycle were found. On August 16, 2017, the Emery County Sheriff's Office officially launched a search operation for missing student Eric Woods. Given his age, lack of chronic medical conditions, and good physical condition, his chances of survival in the desert were considered fairly high if he had water and equipment with him. Time, however, was working against him. Scaling up the operation. On the first day, 5 service vehicles and 18 personnel were involved in the search. By the end of the week, the number had grown to more than 60. Local police, rangers, rescuers from surrounding counties, and volunteers. A mobile headquarters was set up in a parking lot near the trail to coordinate the effort. 2 quadcopters with high-resolution cameras belonging to the park were brought in from the air, as well as a helicopter from a neighboring county for short flights. On the ground, dog handlers worked with 3 dogs trained to search for people by scent. Search areas. The perimeter was divided into 3 sectors. The first sector was the trail itself, starting from the place where the motorcycle was parked. The second was the surrounding canyons, including narrow gorges where it was easy to lose your bearings. The third was the more remote plateaus, which, according to experienced rangers, could only be reached by people with training. Finds on the trail. During the first 2 days, the main focus was on the trail, where blurred footprints had already been found in the ground near the parking lot. The searchers traced them several dozen meters deep, but then they disappeared on a rocky area. The report states, the footprints correspond to a man's size, and it is possible that they belong to the missing person. Further tracking is impossible due to the terrain. No traces were found on other sections of the trail. There were also no signs that the student had tried to pitch a tent or left any marks. Canyon search groups of volunteers and rangers combed the nearby canyons. The reports describe how each group moved slowly, examining the ground and rock ledges. Paint on rocks and GPS tracks were used to mark the areas that had been searched. In some places, there were remnants of old campfires, but experts determined that they were at least several months old and unrelated to the missing person. Use of technology, quadcopters flew at an altitude of up to 150 meters, photographing areas that were difficult to reach on foot. The video was then reviewed at headquarters. In 3 days, they obtained more than 14 hours of footage. No traces of people or equipment were found. A helicopter made 2 flights, but the thick shadows of the canyons made the search from above ineffective. Reaction of volunteers, local residents familiar with the terrain, took part. They organized themselves into small groups of 4 to 5 people and received sectors and radios from headquarters. According to one of the volunteers, the area was too large and any traces disappeared within a few hours due to the wind. Results of the first week. Several sneaker prints were found at the beginning of the trail. Further on, they disappeared. There were no signs of a tent, abandoned belongings, or a place to sleep. All items found, scraps of fabric, bottles, canned food, date back to earlier periods and are not related to Woods. The searchers returned every day without any confirmed evidence. The official report from headquarters on August 20th stated, the area within a 12-kilometer radius of the vehicle's parking location has been surveyed. No items directly related to the missing person have been found. It is recommended to expand the search area and involve additional resources. This concluded the first stage of the search operation. All traces indicated that Eric had left his motorcycle and headed deeper into the desert on foot, but no confirmation that he had gone more than a few dozen meters could be found. After the first week of active searching, when the main routes around the campsite had been checked and no confirmed traces of the missing person had been found, the police began to shift their attention to new possible leads. Reports were coming into headquarters from local residents and tourists. Most of them were too vague or contradictory, but a few versions seemed promising enough to be checked out. Eyewitness report. On August 17th, the third day of the operation, a middle-aged man, a resident of a small town nearby, called the sheriff's hotline. He claimed that the day before, he had seen a young man who looked very similar to the one shown on the news in a nearby canyon. According to him, the young man was walking along a trail without a backpack and looked somewhat exhausted. The report was recorded in the operations log. The coordinates were approximate. The witness described local landmarks that only those who frequently visit the desert would be familiar with. A group of 5 people, including a ranger who was familiar with the area, was dispatched to investigate. The search lasted more than 6 hours. An area of about 4 square kilometers was combed. Several shoe prints were found in the sand, but they had already been partially erased by the wind. The size and tread pattern of the sneakers did not match the description of Eric's shoes provided by his parents. In addition, no other traces of presence were found at the site. No bottles, no scraps of paper, no signs of recreation. As a result, the group's report was unequivocal. There was no evidence that the missing student had been in the specified canyon. Later, investigators concluded that the witness could have confused Eric with another tourist, as a large number of young people wearing similar clothing were visiting the park at that time. Tire tracks. 2 days later, another opportunity arose at headquarters. Volunteers who were surveying an area a mile from the parking lot reported that they had found tire tracks on a sandy path. At first glance, they looked like motorcycle tracks. This was particularly interesting because it remained unclear why Eric's vehicle was parked near the trail, but his tracks were in a different direction. A group of experts went to the site. They examined the tracks, took photographs, and made impressions of the tread. Initial reports suggested that the student may have decided to drive deeper into the desert after parking, and then returned on foot. This version seemed logical, but it raised even more questions. Why leave the vehicle in another area and return without it? The examination quickly dispelled any doubts. The tread pattern on the tracks did not match Eric's motorcycle tires. It turned out that they were wide prints from ATVs used by local hunters. This was confirmed by a resident of a neighboring village. During those days, he and his friends had been riding ATVs in the desert to check traps. As a result, the investigation closed this version. The final report states, "The tire tracks in section number 4 do not belong to the missing person's vehicle. The probable origin is the ATVs of local hunters. The version about the missing person traveling on a motorcycle is rejected." Other minor reports. During this period, other calls were received. Someone claimed to have seen a motorcyclist resembling Eric near the highway at the exit from the district. Another said he had met a guy with a backpack in a small town. All these reports were checked, but none were confirmed. Cameras that could have captured his appearance in those areas showed nothing. Conclusion of the stage. The third week of the search operation ended with virtually no results. All the false leads took up resources and time, but did not provide any new evidence. The final report from headquarters stated, "No confirmed evidence of Eric Woods' presence outside the main search area has been obtained. Eyewitness reports have proven to be false. The tire tracks found belong to other individuals. It is recommended that the search continue to focus on the area around the vehicle's parking spot." It gradually became clear that there were no reliable leads. Each new tip resulted in a fruitless trip and disappointment. Nevertheless, the search continued. The disappearance of a student in the middle of summer in one of the state's most visited parks remained an event that demanded maximum attention. When the first 2 weeks of active operations yielded no results, the headquarters decided to expand the search perimeter. While initial efforts were concentrated within a 10 to 12 kilometer radius, of the location of Eric Woods' motorcycle, the plan was now to cover nearly 30 kilometers around Goblin Valley Park. Organization of the new phase, the headquarters was moved to a larger tent camp. A new map with sectors was created. Each area was assigned to a separate group: police, rangers, volunteers, or dog handlers. GPS tracks were used for tracking and uploaded to a shared database. Every morning, there was a short meeting to announce the tasks, and in the evening, a report. Rescuers focused their attention on canyons they had not previously entered. These areas were considered potentially dangerous, as a person without sufficient water could easily die there from heat or injury. Weather conditions. August in the desert was typical. Daytime temperatures reached +135–37 degrees C, and it was at least +130 in the shade. In the evening, it cooled down quickly, and the temperature dropped below +20. The sun dried out the soil, and winds from the southwest blew away any footprints within a few hours. This created a problem. The traces that Eric might have left in the early days were now completely erased. Discovery of a piece of fabric. On August 20th, one of the teams in the eastern sector came across a piece of fabric among the rocks. It was a piece of thick, dark-colored material, similar to nylon from a tent or backpack. The item was immediately documented, photographed on site, and sent to headquarters. The discovery sparked a wave of hope. In the evening, it was sent to the laboratory for express analysis. The next day, the results showed that the fabric was heavily worn, and the fibers had lost their structure. According to preliminary estimates, it had been lying in the open air for several years. In addition, old data was found in the archives. Several years ago, tourists lost a tent in the same area, and it was probably from it that the scrap remained. The report states, the item is not related to Woods' disappearance. The probable origin is the remains of equipment lost in previous years. Gradual winding down of the search. In the fourth week, the intensity decreased. Some of the volunteers returned to work, and the rangers resumed their patrols in other areas. The headquarters continued to operate, but the number of people was reduced by half. Search teams were still combing new areas, but to no avail. None of Eric's personal belongings were found. No backpack, no shoes, no traces of a campfire. The daily reports repeated the same phrase: no results. On August 29th, the sheriff issued an official statement. All major routes and remote canyons within a 30-kilometer area have been searched. No evidence of the missing student's presence has been found. The active operation is being suspended. The case has been reclassified as a missing person investigation, and further action will depend on new evidence or findings. Family reaction. The Woods family disagreed with the decision and publicly stated that the search had been called off too soon. They organized their own volunteer groups, which continued to search the desert from time to time without official coordination. Summary of the stage. The operation lasted more than 3 weeks. The only potential find was a piece of fabric, which turned out to be old and unusable as evidence. No traces of Eric Woods' tent, personal belongings, or any other equipment were found. The case was officially reclassified as missing person, investigation ongoing without active search. After that, Eric's case was classified as unsolved for the first time, and with each passing week, the chances of finding him alive rapidly diminished. In the spring of 2018, almost 9 months after the active search was called off, the case of Eric Woods' disappearance reappeared in police reports. The reason was a chance discovery by tourists. Discovery of the knife. 2 residents of a neighboring county, who were exploring abandoned mines in a former mining area, stumbled upon a metal object. It was an old mine with a collapsed entrance and numerous pieces of debris inside. rusty cans, broken equipment, and remnants of old canisters. Among this mess lay a pocket knife. Its blade was broken, and the handle was covered with corrosion. At first glance, it looked like one of dozens of items left in the mine since it was in operation. However, the tourists knew about the missing student, as his story was still being discussed in the local news at the time. They reported the find to the sheriff's office. The knife was registered as evidence and added to the case file. Police response. The initial report states, "A pocket knife was found in mine number 14. The item is damaged and was found among a large amount of foreign debris. No connection to the missing person has been confirmed." In fact, investigators immediately concluded that the find was not directly related to the case. The reasoning was simple. The mine had been used for decades by various people, from miners to tourists, so finding a knife or other household item there was not surprising. The family's position, Eric's family, had a different reaction to the find. They insisted on a re-examination. His mother sent a written request to the police, emphasizing that her son had a similar knife. The family then provided several home photos showing Eric on previous hikes, holding exactly the same folding knife, with a distinctive shape, a dark handle, and a metal rim at the base. According to his mother, the knife was a gift from his grandfather on his 18th birthday, and Eric always took it with him. This information forced investigators to change their approach. The knife was sent for examination to a forensic laboratory. Expert examination specialists compared the found item with the photographs provided. Several characteristic details were established. The shape of the handle matched. A crack was found on the blade in the same place as in the photo taken a year before the disappearance. The manufacturer's markings matched completely. A few months later, the official expert conclusion confirmed that the knife from the mine most likely belonged to Eric Woods. Significance of the find. Despite this, its location did not help advance the investigation. The mine was more than 8 kilometers away from where the motorcycle was parked. It was unclear how the knife ended up there and whether Eric had carried it himself or if it had gotten there some other way. The official conclusion of the case stated, "The discovery of the knife belonging to the missing person confirms his presence in the region. There is no information about the circumstances under which the knife ended up in the mine." For the family, this discovery was a painful confirmation that Eric had indeed disappeared in the desert, and that there was almost no chance that he had fled voluntarily. For the police, the knife was the only piece of material evidence after months of fruitless searches. After the knife was found in 2018, investigators spent several more months trying to find any additional leads. They checked people who had access to the mine and interviewed groups of tourists who had been there. This yielded no results. In mid-2019, the case was effectively declared a cold case. The reports stated that active operations had been suspended, the materials were being stored in the archives, and the investigation could only be reopened if new evidence came to light. Official closure. The Emery County Sheriff's Office issued a brief statement. The search lasted over a year. The physical evidence is limited to a motorcycle and a knife found in the mine. There is no other material. The case has been archived. For the police, this meant that no more resources would be allocated to the ongoing search. The case remained only on paper. The family's actions, Eric's family, did not accept this decision. His mother and older brother began their own search. They created a page on social media, published old photos of Eric, the coordinates of his last route, and appeals to possible witnesses. Several times they organized trips to the desert with small groups of volunteers. These trips were unofficial, without police involvement. In August 2019, the family contacted journalists from a regional television channel. A story was published entitled "The Missing Student: A Year Without Answers." It showed the place where his motorcycle was parked, an interview with his mother, and archival photos. The story received some attention and was widely reported in the local media. Spreading the word over the next 2 years, the family regularly posted reminders about the case online. They placed ads in local newspapers and created a separate website with all the available facts. According to them, they received dozens of messages from people who had seen a similar guy in different regions. Most of these reports had nothing to do with the case, but each one was forwarded to the police. Versions discussed. There were several assumptions in the public sphere about the reasons for his disappearance. Escape. Some commentators suggested that Eric had deliberately left everything behind and disappeared. They cited his introverted nature and love of solo travel as evidence. However, an analysis of his finances refuted this theory. After his disappearance, his accounts remained inactive, and his passport and documents were found in his dorm room. Suicide. This version was put forward by several psychologists invited by journalists. They explained that prolonged solitude could be a sign of an internal crisis, but there were no notes or evidence of an unstable state. On the contrary, friends and teachers described him as balanced. Attack. This is the most common theory among the family and some investigators. Proponents of this version emphasized that the knife found in the mine was not there by accident. Eric probably made contact with someone in the desert, and subsequent events led to his disappearance. But at the time, there was no evidence to confirm the presence of outsiders. The state of the case in 2020-2021. Every year, the sheriff's office formally updated the status. The case is not closed, awaiting new information. The family sent requests to resume the search, but received a standard response. There were insufficient resources and no new evidence. In 2020, several volunteer organizations conducted their own surveys of part of the canyons. They used drones and thermal imaging cameras. The search lasted a week, but yielded no results. Media coverage. Every time another anniversary of the disappearance passed, local newspapers and websites published short notes. Eric's photos reappeared in the news feeds. The publications reminded readers that the young man had disappeared in August 2017, that his vehicle had been found, but that he himself had not been located. Each article ended with contact information for anyone who could provide information. Conclusion of the stage. By 2022, the case had remained virtually unchanged. All 3 main versions, escape, suicide, assault, were discussed, but none were confirmed by concrete evidence. The knife remained the only item linked to the student after his disappearance. The Eric Woods case was officially considered unsolved. For the police, it was just another cold case, but for the family, it was a constant burden and a daily reminder that there were no answers. In May 2023, almost 6 years after Eric Woods' disappearance, the case, which had been archived as a cold case, took a new turn. Discovery of remains. On May 18th, 2 tourists from Moab were hiking a little-known route through a system of canyons southeast of Goblin Valley. The area had no official markings and was rarely visited. As they walked, they noticed fragments of bones among the rocks. At first, they thought they were animal remains, but the skull turned out to be human. Nearby lay a worn-out sneaker sole and a metal container measuring approximately 2015. The tourists immediately recorded the coordinates and called 911. An investigative team from the Emery County Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene along with forensic experts. The area was cordoned off and access was blocked. An initial examination confirmed that the remains had been lying there for years. The clothing had practically rotted away, and the backpack and other items were missing. Metal container. The container lying nearby attracted particular attention. Inside was a hardcover notebook. The paper had survived thanks to its protective cover. The first pages were dated August 2017. Diary, the handwriting matched that of Eric Woods, as confirmed by his school notebooks. The entries were fragmentary, made in haste. The dates show that they covered 6 days after his disappearance. The fragments that became known to the public were made public by the mother of the deceased. The police did not disclose the full text, citing its status as material evidence. August 14, 2017. Left the bike in the parking lot, went down the path. It's hot, not much water. August 15, 2017. Night. Saw 2 people with flashlights, far away. They didn't come closer. August 16, 2017. Fell while climbing, severe pain in my leg, fracture, can't get up. Screamed, no one answered. August 17, 2017. The same people again at night. Heard voices, cried out. They are silent. August 18, 2017. Stole the flask I left by the rock. Found a cigarette butt. They were close. August 19, 2017. No water. I screamed all night. I saw a light higher up in the canyon. They heard me. Why didn't they help? It hurts a lot. I want to go home. If they find me, tell my mom. There were no entries after August 19th. The family's reaction, Eric's mother, having received a copy of the diary after it had been examined, decided to publish part of the text. In comments to journalists, she said, "People need to know that he was calling for help. He wrote about those who were nearby and didn't help. This is the truth that cannot be hidden." Significance for the investigation. The diary became the first documentary evidence that Eric survived for several days after his disappearance, suffered a serious leg injury, and had contact, at least indirectly, with unknown individuals who did not provide assistance. The content of the entries became a key argument for reopening the criminal investigation. After the remains and notebook were found in May 2023, the case was officially transferred from cold case status to active criminal investigation. All items and materials found were sent to state laboratories for detailed examination. Identification of the remains, forensic experts conducted a complete analysis of the bones. DNA samples were compared with biological materials previously provided by the Woods family, in particular, samples of the mother's blood, as well as Eric's belongings stored in the dormitory. The result was unequivocal. The remains belonged to a 21-year-old student who disappeared in August 2017. It has been officially confirmed that the skeleton found in the canyon is Eric Woods. Analysis of the diary. The notebook in the metal container was sent to the forensic department. Specialists examined the paper, ink, and handwriting. The examination confirmed that the materials corresponded to 2017, and there were no signs of forgery. The handwriting matched Eric's writing samples obtained from his university notebooks. The official conclusion: the diary is authentic and was written by Woods himself in the days after his disappearance. Third-party traces. During the examination of the site where the diary was found, forensic experts discovered several cigarette butts nearby. One of them had enough biological material for analysis. The laboratory extracted DNA and uploaded the data to the National CODIS database. A few days later, the system returned a match. The profile belonged to Jonathan M., a 42-year-old resident of Emery County. Suspect information. According to archival data, Jonathan M. had a criminal record for assault and theft. He had served his sentence several years ago and, after his release, lived in a village 40 kilometers from the park. Unofficially, he was associated with a small group of so-called metal detectors who searched for scrap metal and non-ferrous metals in abandoned mines and often clashed with tourists. In 2016, park visitors had already complained about his aggressive behavior, but no official case was opened at that time. Connection to the Woods case. Now, after confirming the DNA on the cigarette butt, investigators have returned to the previous materials. The knife found in the mine in 2018 was officially recognized as material evidence. There were no biological traces left on it, but the very fact that Eric's knife was found in the mine, an area often visited by metal detectors, was considered indirect confirmation of their involvement. A June 2023 report from the Sheriff's Office states, "The data obtained allows us to conclude that outsiders were active in the area where the missing person was last seen. The DNA match from the cigarette butt and the suspect's history provide sufficient grounds for bringing charges against him." Official reaction: the DNA match was not initially disclosed. Only the family was informed. Later, when the district attorney confirmed his readiness to open a criminal case, the suspect's name appeared in official documents. Results of the stage: DNA confirmed that the remains belonged to Eric Woods. The diary was found to be authentic, with entries made by the student himself. A cigarette butt was found near the remains, and the DNA from it matches Jonathan M.'s profile. The knife found earlier is now officially considered evidence confirming the connection with the metal detector group. The investigation has reached a new level. For the first time since 2017, investigators had the specific name of a person who could be involved in the student's death. In August 2023, the Emery County Sheriff's Office released a final report on the disappearance of Eric Woods. It was now officially classified not as a missing person case, but as a criminal investigation into a murder with a specific suspect. Key findings of the examination forensic analysis confirmed that Eric had a broken tibia. This injury made it impossible for him to travel long distances. In conditions of high temperature and lack of water, the consequences were fatal. The report stated, "Death was caused by a lower limb injury, complicated by dehydration and lack of assistance." An additional factor was the presence of strangers, as recorded in the diary. An entry from August 18th, "They stole the flask I left by the rock. I found a cigarette butt. They were close by," confirmed that he had been left without help and that the situation had been artificially complicated. Identification of the suspect DNA on a cigarette butt found near the remains matched the profile of Jonathan M., a 42-year-old resident of Emery County. He already had a criminal record for assault and theft and was a member of an informal group of metal detectors. The case file also states that in 2016, he received complaints from tourists for aggressive behavior. Official actions based on this information: Jonathan M. was arrested. During his arrest, he refused to testify, exercising his right to an attorney. The prosecution brought 2 charges against him: second-degree murder, criminally negligent homicide. A knife found in the mine in 2018 was included as a separate item in the case. Although there were no biological traces left on it, the examination confirmed that it was Eric's knife. The fact that it was found in a mine frequently visited by metal detectors further indicated a possible connection between the group and the incident. The family's position. In August 2023, Eric's remains were officially handed over to the Woods family for burial. Along with them, a notebook was returned, in the same condition in which it was found. His mother told reporters, "We've been waiting 6 years for this. He cried out for help, and now it's been proven that he was heard. No one had the right to leave him there." Final report of the sheriff. The final document stated, "Case status, reopened, classification, criminal homicide. Suspect, Jonathan M., 42, resident of Emery County. He has been arrested and charged with murder and failure to render aid. Cause of death, leg injury, complicated by lack of aid and external intervention." The family received the remains and diary of the deceased. Conclusion. This concluded a 6-year case that began with a motorcycle left in a parking lot near a trail. It ended with forensic confirmation of death, evidence in the form of a diary, and the official arrest of a specific individual.